Welcome to PHRP Perspectives, your go-to resource for navigating ethics, compliance, and best practices in human subjects research. Each episode delivers expert insights, practical advice, and real-world stories to help you stay ahead and make informed decisions. PHRP Perspectives is brought to you by PHRP Online Training.
Earn your certification for Human Subjects Protection Training with PHRP Online Training. PHRP offers 2 courses: PHRP Online Training for biomedical or clinical topics, and PHRP SBE, which is designed for social, behavioral, and educational research. Continuing education credits are available for a variety of professionals. PHRP Online Training is available in English, Spanish, and French. Learn more at phrptraining.com.
And now, here is PHRP Perspectives, Ethics, Research, and Compliance.
Hello, I'm your host, Susan Court, and joining us on PHRP Perspectives are Joe Smith, PHRP Advisory Board Member, and his guest, Samantha Martocci. Today's topic is improving IRB community outreach methods. Joe is a certified IRB professional with 20 years experience in human research protections and regulatory compliance. Additionally, he has 10 years experience as the Conflict of Interest Administrator at the University of Maryland College Park and has been the Director of Human Research Protection Program at UMCP for 15 years. Sam is an IRB Specialist in Education and Improvement with the University of Maryland. She is a certified information professional and has a master's degree in public health and epidemiology. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Susan.
Joe, start out by telling us a little bit about this topic and why you thought it was important for you and Sam to discuss on PHRP Perspectives.
Sure. So we're going to talk about community outreach as it pertains to the IRB and how we can communicate better with communities internal to the institution that the IRB serves and the community that's outside of the institution that participants might be drawn from. One of the number one things regarding community outreach is communication with potential participants and improving their ability to understand their rights as research participants and maybe inform them about opportunities that might impact them or their communities. So what we're going to start off with is defining community. So we're going to start with defining internal community outreach. And Sam, what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think internal community can encompass a lot of different groups. There's, the researchers at your institution, your IRB members, and any other components of your human research protection program. So that could be like your conflict of interest, your Office of Research Administration, any biosafety or radiation safety groups. And then, there's lots of different outreach you can do with this group or these groups. You can do annual surveys of the community and members, so your researchers and your IRB members. You can maintain like a robust website with lots of resources, send out updates via listserv, things like presentations, and you can also collaborate with other relevant offices as part of your institution. So some, universities might have something like an Office of Community Engagement, and you can reach out to them to discuss various community engagement efforts that you could partner on. So that's sort of how I would describe internal community outreach and the internal community.
Those are great points, Sam. Sometimes these offices are built into the institution and there's communication already happening. But when you have a administrative structure within the Human Research Protection Program, they can benefit from interacting with these groups. There's sometimes investigators don't know they need to talk to somebody from the biosafety office, depending on what materials they're working with. And that impacts the type of interactions they have with their research participants. So great examples. So let's move on to external community outreach. And what does that look like compared to the internal outreach?
Yeah. So the external community, you can kind of see, again, different groups. There's the research participants, the people who are already actively participating in studies. There's prospective participants, the people who might be deciding or being recruited for various studies. And then just the surrounding community at your institution. So various clinics, things like that. And to do outreach with these external communities, it can look like a lot of different things. So investigators can do things like, meet with heads of clinics to talk about potential projects or potential partnerships, posting resources at clinics or in public spaces, with permission, of course, posting educational resources, from the Human Research Protection Program about participating in research and rights, participant rights, and also just posting those on your website so that they're available to prospective and active research
Yeah, those
participants.
are all great points. I mean, some of the things I think about when we talk about external community outreach is the sort of different circles depending on where your institution is situated. So, if you're in an urban setting, and we've talked about this before, sometimes the community is right outside your door, and you can walk up and down the street, canvass the neighborhood, and like you said, you can meet with heads of clinics, and you can talk to them. You can say, "Hey, can I put up information about rights as a research participant with a web address or phone number, email address, something like that?" And that helps to make a connection with that immediate group, community group outside of the doors of your institution. And then you move out further where you have suburban situated institutions where the outreach looks a little bit different. And then further out, you have rural communities where everybody's more spread out. So it might take a different type of approach to reach those individuals. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You have to consider, the specific situation of your institution when thinking about community outreach for sure.
So one of the things that you mentioned were for internal outreach is listservs for updates, presentations, things like that. Um, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, and with listservs, you sort of just have a list of people you're sending tons of information out to periodically. But one of the things I've noticed over the years is that sending information out over the listserv can sort of lead to like a word of mouth campaign. So people who aren't involved with human subject research at the time might be working with someone who is involved in a human subjects research project, and then whatever information sent out gets passed along to the other person, and then it sort of trickles out and it gets around the departments, and then people end up coming to us. So there's sort of a hidden benefit of using a listserv, which I think sometimes can feel a little bit, rote and maybe cold, but it is a good way to get information out to the entire community, and it does spread.
Right. I agree. I think even if you're not reaching, your exact population of every investigator at your institution doing human subjects research, it's very likely that the information will get out through, you know, departments or collaborators, things like that. So you can trust that, if you have like 75% of your intended audience receiving your information, then I think that's pretty
Yeah,
solid.
and one of the other things that I think we've picked up on recently is the institution having an office of community engagement. So a lot of institutions have these offices, and they view community outreach from similar but different perspectives. They're getting all kinds of information out, not just information about rights as a research participant or opportunities to participate in research. Um, these offices, I think, are a huge benefit, obviously not only to the community, but to the Human Research Protection Program and the IRB, because they're a source of expertise that maybe the IRB doesn't have readily available. I mean, you might have to go out and talk to an IRB member who has specific community expertise, but usually you get very niche responses. They're working with a very specific population, but these offices of community engagement really, they have resources for all kinds of different populations, and I think that's very beneficial to that administrative
Hmm.
HRPP structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I think it's been important for our office, and I'm sure a lot of other IRB offices and larger programs, are reaching out to folks that you work with, reaching out to the investigators, surveying your audience. Um, you know, in your experience, what sort of questions do you ask, and what sort of responses do you give?
Yeah, so I think people are generally happy to provide feedback.
That's
People
true.
love to give their kind of thoughts and opinions. You might get some negative information, but you can use that. That's really constructive a lot of the time. Any real feedback that you can get from investigators or other parts of your human research protection program. So I know there's a lot of there's a lot of outreach and a lot of questions that can come up. So I think a lot of people have questions, that are specific to their projects. A
Hmm.
lot of the time when you're doing outreach, they might reply to a listserv and say, oh, I have this question about this project. Can you help me? Um, and I think that can kind of spiral into, maybe spiral is not the best word, but it can develop into a
That's
relationship
true.
really, with an investigator. And you can leverage that. Having a good relationship with investigators is a really
Hmm.
important part of community outreach. Putting a face to a name, being a point of contact for somebody, it can, help them understand. You can kind of understand each other a little bit better. You understand the project, you understand the investigator's goals, what are they trying to do, things like that. And then in return, we can kind of educate them on what we're here to do, and that we really are here to help them get their research done in the most
Yeah, I mean,
ethical
and it
way.
and it builds trust between, all parties. It's
Absolutely.
a really good
Hmm.
point, and you ask somebody about how they're feeling or how they're, you know, um, affected by things that you implement as a human research protection program or as an IRB office. It builds that trust because it says like, hey, we understand that you have a perspective here too, and we're not here trying to
Hmm.
dictate to you what needs to happen. I
Hmm.
mean, of course, we all deal with the regulations and the institutional policies that you have to help people navigate, but there are those little things that you can do in the office to help assist the investigators, get the word out, oh, here's something that this investigator is doing from this side of campus. And,
Hmm.
you know, I always feel that I learned something from it when we get that feedback. And there's always there's always a stone that you unturned. I feel like every year a
Hmm.
survey like this comes out, there's something that, maybe somebody didn't feel comfortable bringing up or sending an email about, but you know, we sort of nudged them and said, hey, what do you think? And, they give you some really great feedback that you can then implement. Um, so with that being said, um, let's talk about resources for a minute. Um, I know this is something that um, if you're not familiar with community outreach, it can be kind of difficult to get your hands around and to sort of build a foundation. So, um, you know, tell me about that. You've dug around and found things before to sort of build off of. Um, tell us about it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you raise an interesting kind of phrase there about digging around. So I think that's um, a huge component of community outreach. So one thing that I've done a lot in the past is looking at websites internally. So what resources do we have now? Do they need to be updated? Are they out of date? Do we need to remove them altogether? Just running them by the correct
Mm.
people. If you have, data security resources, are you running them by your data security office? Things like that. So, kind of digging into what resources you are actually providing and assessing how can we make this better. I think that's one way to kind of get started. But then you can also look in that process at other institutions, see what resources other institutions have. And, that can include publicly available resources, so things that are on their websites, things like that. But I know lots of institutions will sort of reach out to their colleagues and ask, like, what are you providing any investigators? Do you have any policies? Do you have any, internal resources that you could share? So you can definitely do another layer of outreach to other, institutions that are doing similar work to your
Yeah,
own.
it's great. It's if we don't have to build the foundation ourselves, it's always nice. You kind of get a leg up. or a jump start on things. And I think in both of our experiences, we've reached out to institutions, and they're more than willing to share. And they're
Mhm.
a lot of times they've done the same thing. They've contacted their peer
Yeah.
institutions and they've shared best practices. And it really helps to kind of kickstart what you need to do at your institution for building a solid community outreach program. Um, and you also mentioned the internal resources at your institution. It's when we started doing this to sort of beef up our own policies and procedures and to just like you said earlier, make a more robust website with more resources. It's shocking sometimes how much information is actually out there at the institution you work at. I mean, if you work at a large institution,
Mhm.
it's impossible to know everybody, and it's impossible to know every program and every office. But you know, it's sort of like what I said before. Once you start seeking things out or talking to people, they'll say, "Oh, hey, go talk to this person or reach out to that office. They know this and they know that," and it I think it takes the stress off a little bit because you know that there are other people on campus with expertise in this area. So you don't have to be the expert all the time in the IRB office with this one.
Exactly.
Um, and I think as well as I do that we're supposed to be regulatory experts to support the research enterprise to help the investigators.
Mhm.
Um, so anywhere you can get a little bit of an assist there is helpful.
Agreed.
So, one of the things that we sort of joke about, especially in this day and age, with so many things being over, video chat and different video conferencing platforms, is being able to put a face to a name. Um, and I think the not only connecting with the research community, but being able to connect with the people who reach out to the community, who are speaking not just to the research community but to the external community. Um, I think it's a really big thing in building relationships. We sort of talked about that earlier. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I know personally I've become like the go-to kind of IRB person for lots of investigators that I've worked with, just because they know you, they've had good experiences with you, and they want to kind of keep that rapport going. And I think that um, it really, that trust, it goes back to that trust that we were talking about. If they trust us that, we're not trying to have like
Mhm.
gotcha moments with them, we're really trying to facilitate and help them navigate. And, when investigators know that that's the case, they're more willing to reach out to you when they have problems or, unanticipated issues. And they know that we're a place of support that can really, just improve the research generally, improve the rights of participants, and just, improve compliance
Yeah,
overall.
that's a really great point. I think that you know, when I speak to people, especially folks who are transferring from one institution to another, um, and they have to talk to us. They're transferring a grant or they're moving,
Mhm.
a human subject project to our institution from their previous institution. How do they do it? Um, and they they mention, hey, I've heard from my new colleagues that your office is really great. Um,
Mhm.
and my previous institution wasn't so great. So, I'm really looking forward to working with you. So that really, it's sort of a hidden benefit here that, you're sort of fostering, the compliance functions of your program
Mhm.
by making it, a smoother path for the investigators to get their work done, and pointing them in the right direction. So, the fear of being caught up in this bureaucratic kind of, mess, it sort of turns people off from maybe doing what they need to do and trying to kind of skirt the rules, whether
Mhm.
they're, intending to do it or not. Um,
Right.
so it's a huge thing to be able to um, work with these folks, to get them started, to give them good guidance, or at least, like I said earlier, um, we don't have to be the experts in all areas, but to get them going in the right direction. And that's,
Mhm.
building internally, I think we know a little bit more about. The external stuff can be a challenge. But that's what we're here for. We're here to get people going in the right direction.
For sure.
Do you have any other thoughts about benefits of outreach? I mean, I think we covered a quite a bit here today. In your personal experience, do you have any common topics or subjects that investigators have brought to you?
I think there's lots of things that investigators bring to us. A lot of times, people are asking, do I need IRB approval? Things like that. And in those conversations, you can really help them understand the regulations, help them understand what kinds of things that they need to submit to, our office or other offices, things like that. And I think that can be really, really useful as internal kind of outreach when people are reaching out with sort of like, where do I get started? That kind of thing. That's a really good opportunity to point people in the right direction. We have this on our website, and if you have questions about this, go here, and here's who you can talk to about, you know, compensation or, participant payment, things like that. Just being able to point people to the existing resources can do a lot.
Yeah, all very good points. All around. And externally, one of the things that I've found is when you see an investigator who is working with a population that it's either a vulnerable population or maybe a population you don't see much, but has some specific needs and, needs specific resources, anything like that.
Mhm.
It's not a bad idea to reach out to that investigator and say, hey, could we, possibly use you on the IRB? Would you be interested in becoming a member?
Mhm.
That way, they don't have to be a primary member. You could have them join as an alternate and they could join, be a non-voting member, and they're there as a resource. And you roster them on the committee, and you don't lose that connection with that group. So there's a number of ways that you can sort of make all this stuff work in a very
Mhm.
beneficial way for, you know, internally for the office and then externally for everybody else. So, um, I think we covered almost everything we could possibly cover here.
Well,
Um,
it does sound like the key to success is starting with those good relationships and continuing to build them. I think that's a point that I heard throughout your conversation today.
yeah, that's absolutely correct. One of the things we try to do is to make any sort of interaction we have with our investigators educational, and if there's ever a slip up or a mistake, we want, as we just said, we want people to come to us. So we try not to make anything punitive. Even if there is a need for a corrective action, the goal is to work with the investigator and to kind of help them hammer out a pathway forward so you can fix the problem and address that and then look at how can we make sure this doesn't happen again, you know? And
Mhm.
a lot of times it's an honest mistake. Very rarely is it something nefarious.
Well, this was a very interesting topic. I appreciate both of you sharing your insights here on PHRP Perspectives. Thank you for coming today. And if anybody has any questions about this topic, they're welcome to reach out to us at info@phrptraining.com. We also invite you to subscribe to PHRP Perspectives and hope to see you again next time.